On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, the federal budget battle stretches into 2025. Industry anticipates the new administration's new initiatives, and AI efforts go into overdrive across the agencies. Welcome to Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. Congress is still working through the budget process for the rest of this fiscal year at this hour, but the broad outlines of the budget show that top lines aren't growing this year. Sonny Hashmi is head of federal at Uncork. He's former commissioner of the Federal Acquisition Service at the General Services Administration. Robert Shea is co-founder and partner at Gov Navigators, former associate director for administration and government performance at the Office of Management and Budget. Gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. I asked both of you for this program to write out your top 5 for 2025, and I was struck by the fact that, Sonny, you wrote it resource constraints as your top issue, and Robert, you wrote budget reconciliation and impoundment. Sonny, I start with you. The resource constraints are the thing that you think Fed should be paying the most attention to for 2025?
I think it's going to be a common theme as we look into 2025. Part of that is going to be challenges with, or at least the timing of the budget reconciliation and how it's going to flow through. But part of that is also the new incoming administration's focus on government efficiency is going to lead to maybe some, questioning and delays around the investments that are required to continue to make, the current programs operate. So I think as agency leaders, it's important for leadership to really understand and be prepared to manage within an environment where maybe significant new hiring may not be an option in the short term, or additional resources may not be available for investment in these programs.
What's your expectation, Robert, as to how budget constraints will impact the things that you care about, like data analysis and performance at agencies?
Well, I think, for so long we've tried to get management budget issues to the top of the agenda. I think we're going to see that, as Sonny says, but from a different vantage point. Restraint is going to be the watchword, and the Trump team has forecast that they'll leverage tools like apportionment, which is the Office of Management and Budget's tool to set some limits on federal agency and program budgets. And I think they will lean into using those in ways that we've not seen in the past.
How does that trickle down to the agency level?
So you'll see restrictions on agencies' ability to spend what has been appropriated by Congress. That will, I think, get the ire of Congress. And I think it'll eventually have to be determined by the courts whether OMB even has the kind of authority that they promised to use.
All right, DOGE seems to be the theme that is overhanging all of the discussions that we're having on this program and that's happening in our community. Sonny, what's your sense of what agency leaders should be thinking about regarding the questions they might be asked, the things that they'll be expected to do, information they'll be expected to produce, and all of that, considering that this is an organization, it's not a government agency, and it's not congressionally sanctioned, that it's sanctioned only by the administration?
I mean, that is all true, but listen, administrative transitions are a time of change in any administration. So agencies should be planning today, and I know many are, to develop a deeper understanding of the programs that they run, how they measure success, what KPIs and measurements are used, and be ready to ask and answer questions around what is priorities for the incoming administration and how those programs relate to those priorities, and be ready for that change. Some of those priorities will shift, and being able to adapt as we move forward in 2025 is going to be a key theme. The second thing I'm going to make is that while a lot is yet to be determined, specifics are not yet available, a lot of the proposals that DOGE and other organizations are proposing have potentially a lot of bipartisan support. I think everybody can agree on the fact that technology modernization should be a key driver to creating more efficiencies in government. So those are the areas where there's going to be a lot of momentum, I believe. And so long as the right kind of resourcing and priorities can be made clear, I think those are the areas where agencies can double down and rekindle some momentum that may not have been available in the past.
There's this kind of the underlying theme of the discussions that I've been having with career people at the agencies about DOGE, Robert, and that is, I hope they're serious about it, and I hope they take it seriously. And it sounds like the first step that they could take is to ask Sonny, not why aren't these things so, why haven't they been done before, or why haven't they been finished before? Is that a fair read on my part?
I think so. I think the big question, as you say, is what has prevented us from doing some of these big things in the past? Mm-hmm. The two things I'll be looking at most closely are, one, OMB. You won't be surprised. How will DOGE and OMB work together on the proposals they're going to submit. You'll want to see them in the budget. You'll want to see legislative proposals. And then Congress, you mentioned that it's not officially sanctioned, but we've got a Senate DOGE caucus, we've got a House DOGE caucus, we've got a subcommittee on DOGE in the House Oversight Committee. So that indicates, though not officially sanctioned, they're preparing to collaborate with DOGE and receive some of the proposals that will need to be enacted in law in order for the realization of DOGE priorities.
Another item on your top 5 for 25, Robert, is the President's management agenda, the Trump second term PMA. What do you expect to see in it, and what is the indicator if the PMA is either very tightly aligned with what DOGE is doing or isn't aligned at all?
Yeah, I think if the President's management agenda is not aligned with DOGE, then I think we're in for trouble as far as seeing progress on PMA goals is concerned. I'd like to see continuation of customer experience, technology modernization, of course, but we've also got major acquisition reforms, workforce reforms that are going to need a framework to drive progress and hold people accountable for achieving important milestones in each of those areas.
I appreciate that each of you, your top 5 for 25, are all connected together. And Sonny, a couple of yours that are connected: rapidly changing priorities and opportunity to drive deep reform. Is it your sense that you have seen in government what I hear from people, which is there really is a hunger for that and a willingness to go along with it, to drive it, if they get cover from leadership at the top?
Absolutely. That is always the case. Ultimately, it boils down to there's a finite amount of calories available in a day. So what are those priorities that will get enough energy, enough budget, enough focus to be able to actually make progress? There is a wide, across the government, in career and appointed leadership, agreement that certain things need to be invested in, modernized, changed, but there's only so much you can do. And an administration only really has 2 to 3 years to make massive change happen before the next election cycle starts. So the key thing here is going to be a lot of the priorities that may have not received appropriate focus in the past. This may be an opportunity to rekindle those priorities and really really align to the vision of the new administration. And the times of change are also a time of opportunity. So to career leadership, my message always remains, this may be a time for you to re-examine and resurface areas and good ideas that may not have gotten enough momentum in the past, because this may be a new opportunity to make the case on why some of those reforms need to happen.
You sit at a really unique position, I think, because you have, in addition to your FAST Commissioner experience, you were the CIO at GSA, which has potential to really be an important player, doesn't it, in whatever the administration chooses to do moving forward?
Absolutely. The GSA CIO has a somewhat government-wide responsibility, both in terms of how cybersecurity landscape evolves, but also through GSA's shared service model, being able to actually lead the way in some cases on new opportunities for modernization. So as the new administration comes in to start thinking about how to leverage things like AI to drive down efficiencies, or how to draw down technical debt, which is a huge issue that agencies are sitting on, GSA CIO is going to play a critical role.
We have about a minute left. Schedule F, workforce issues, number 5 on your list of the top 5 for 25, Robert, and Schedule F is what every employee that I talk to is worried about in the federal government right now.
And I think they should be. Sonny mentioned that career executives ought to be focused on the reforms that they're chomping at the bit for. That is, if there's career senior executives in those seats at all. What I hope the second Trump administration grasps is that in order to get the things done they want to get done, including downsizing, they're going to need a career workforce to help accomplish those things. What
will you watch for in the first month, 60 days, 100 days, as far as executing on the things that you see on your list?
I'm going to be watching January 20th and 21st like the ball drop in Times Square, because you're going to see not only confirmations of senior executives, but executive orders related to Schedule F, DOGE, budgeting. I'm really going to be seeing what gets done in those first 24, 48 hours.
You, Sonny? Very quickly, 15
I think
seconds.
the key thing I'll be looking for is what the relationship of DOGE is going to be with the with the current apparatus on how the government operates. If it's a advisory body, certainly it's still going to carry a lot of influence and weight, but beyond that requires some rethinking on how government operates and is structured. I'll also be seeing what the key priorities are established through early executive orders, for example, because they will have downstream implications for agencies and how they should position themselves to be successful in the new administration.
Sonny, Robert, we're out of time. Thanks very much for joining me. It's great to have you on the program. You can read more about Sonny and Robert's top 5 for 25 on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, industry anticipates the new administration's new initiatives. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
As we think about the transformative capabilities of AI as it relates to cybersecurity, there is an automation element, but it's not always point A to point B problem solution. Really what's needed are full systems that take advantage of the AI capabilities as it relates to cybersecurity problem spaces. And so it's very natural when you're engaging with a transformative technology like AI for the first time to want to apply that model, that powerful, multifaceted tool directly to the problem space, but you have to be thoughtful about the way you craft a system around it and what are really the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. I liken it to someone taking a twin outboard motor and lashing it to a surfboard, right? It's great for speed and propulsion, not such a great idea to ride on.
Welcome back. The second edition of the Trump administration could look very different from the first edition on acquisition. The Department of Government Efficiency that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy will lead has promised to take a hard look at procurement from a number of different angles. Roger Waldron is president of the Coalition for Government Procurement. Roger, welcome. It's great to see you again. What do you think the impact of the DOGE will be on acquisition, and what do you think they should look at in particular regarding the way the government buys things?
Well, first of all, Francis, thank you. Great to see you. I hope they take a top-down look at procurement across the board. A couple of specific things, commercial item contracting and deregulating commercial item contracting. Back in the 90s, the Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act created commercial item contracting, and at that time, there were only 28 clauses that applied to commercial item contracts. Only 6 of those were required. Today, we have 94 clauses in the FAR that could potentially apply. 34 of those are required, and then there's another 50 or 60 in the DFARs and other agency supplements. So we've seen a re-regulation of commercial item contracting. There's an opportunity there to streamline that, to get it back to the original intent of Congress, to focus on commercial solutions and commercial innovation. I think that should be at the top of the list. I also, in that context, the GSA schedules program, the VA schedules account for just about $75 billion in annual purchases. There's an opportunity there to streamline that. It's a commercial item contracting program. And, this past year in 24, we saw efforts and legislatively to focus on best value in the schedules program. That's a great opportunity. If it would affirm GSA's ability to structure the program to increase the aperture to commercial solutions, commercial innovation, commercial technologies that across the board agencies are buying. So those are 2 key things I think that the DOGE should look at, but fundamentally looking at procurement is a good thing. It can save a lot of money. It also can create a culture in government. People are anxious to and interested in improving performance of government, any job. And you create a culture and empower people to come up with suggestions and ideas to create efficiencies. It can be extremely powerful in making a difference. Because the people with the best ideas are the ones people have to deal with the regulations day in and day out in government, not just the industry as well.
Another item you write about on your top 5 for 25, Roger, is AI's role in procurement and the acquisition of AI. It's 2 things that are connected the same way we talk about AI and cybersecurity. There's securing the AI tools, and then there's using the tools for cyber. Same thing in an acquisition, isn't it?
Absolutely. what we're seeing already is AI being used by industry to prepare proposals, to work that side of it, and then the flip side of it, agencies and departments are now using AI to review proposals. So you got the two AI algorithms, the platforms, sort of communicating to each other. And there's lots of great potential with AI in terms of addressing it. Lots of administrative functions that the government personnel have to deal with day in and day out, so they can focus on true value-added, aspects of their job. I think it increased job satisfaction. But there are also challenges there and things that have to be sorted out through the next 2 or 3 years. Data, how pristine is the data, the quality of the data that's going to go into an AI tool is critical to the success of that tool. Data privacy, and access to that data on the part of government, but also on part of industry. Bias, making sure the tools address any, there's an audit capability to ensure that the bias is addressed. That also goes to the data. What data goes in can potentially create bias. And also contracting smart for it. I think, a performance-based contracting approach. Here's the solution I want. I'm not going to dictate to you what type of AI tool to use or the parameters of that, but this is the solution I want. Demonstrate how you're going to meet that solution.
Roger, it's great to have you on the program as always. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Francis.
You can read more about Roger's top 5 for 25 on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, AI efforts go into overdrive across the agencies. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
For a very long time, our agency partners have struggled with what to do with the enormous amounts of data that they're generating, that they have access to. And really, in the past several years, they've really started to focus on how to make value out of that data. And the way that many are approaching it is to try and make that data open, right? How do we take advantage of the data that exists and make it usable and reusable for multiple different purposes to serve agency needs?
Welcome back. 2025 looks like the year artificial intelligence moves from use cases to scale across the federal government. Agencies are applying AI for mission delivery uses and back office administrative jobs. Dave Wennergren's Chief Executive Officer of ACT-IAC, former Deputy Chief Information Officer and Assistant Deputy Chief Management Officer at the Defense Department. Julie Dunn's a principal at Monument Advocacy. She's former Commissioner of the Federal Acquisition Service at GSA. Both of you, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Dave, AI is taking a big step, it looks like, in 2025. How does one make sure in a leadership role in an agency that you're taking the right steps forward with AI in the coming year?
It is the top topic, I think, in the tech market. And if we're into government efficiencies start by the effective adoption of new technologies. And as we watch what's happened with artificial intelligence as it moved from identifying data to being generative, the next step is reasoning AI and this ability to create a digital workforce, which will just open so many questions up. Like, what's the future of work look like for government employees? How do we take that limited number of government employees and have them focus on the work that has to be done by government people? How can we embrace these digital technologies like AI to help do the work that can't be done by the government employees? It's going to be a big hot topic, and as you said, we've got to get it right, because if we get behind, heaven help us.
How does that intersect with one of your top 5 for 2025, Julie, which is technology modernization? Obviously important all across the government, and there's an intersection, but maybe an overlap, but maybe AI and tech modernization aren't exactly the same thing?
Not exactly the same, but I think AI is going to be a facilitator, to be honest. It's another tool in our toolbox, if you will. It's another tool to analyze data to make good decisions. It's another tool to address some cybersecurity risks, frankly. You can't anymore, given the way the threats are coming in to the federal government in particular. You cannot address that in a manual or you need these kinds of tools to do that. And as you mentioned in the opener, the back office functions, there are a lot of opportunities from auditing to potentially HR. I mean, there are a lot of ways that we can use this tool. And when we talk about AI, that's a broad term. There's different kinds of AI, of course. And I think a lot of people forget the last administration. In the closing days, there was actually an AI executive order that really emphasized innovation. And I think we're going to see that again.
Another item on your top 5 for 25, Julie, is federal personnel. What do you expect to see? We mentioned Schedule F. We talked about that in the first part of this program with Robert and Sonny. Is that something that people should be worried about, or is that something that just people should be aware of on their radar screens?
I think you have to be aware of it. I mean, every administration comes in with new priorities. I think there is probably broad agreement that there are things that you can fix in the civil service. I think in my experience in government, you have really great employees, and then you have employees that are more challenging to manage, and those take the morale from others too. So I think it's an opportunity. It is something to be aware of. I think the telework conversation is going to continue. I think agencies that have really good data about how they are effective, how they are getting their jobs done, how they're serving the customer, I think that's going to be really important.
Dave, one of the items on your top 5 for 25 is customer experience, employee experience, digital transformation. You call it the trifecta of X's. How does that intersect with the idea you talked about earlier about digital workforce and Julie's comments about what the workforce could look like or changes that could be driven in the way the workforce is composed moving forward?
If we learned anything coming out of the pandemic, it's the nature of work has changed. And we have to be able to question the relevancy of the way we used to do stuff. We have to question the relevancy of processes. We have to question the relevancy of certain jobs and maybe even entire organizations. So there's never been a more important time between what the future of work means in terms of technology taking over some steps that used to be done by people and this need to find the right jobs that will make a difference. What are the jobs we're going to need going forward, and then how do we fill those jobs? And to fill those jobs, we need to think differently. The progress has been made about alternative education requirements, right? Your next cyber warrior may not be coming out of a 4-year college degree program, right? How can we get people on board faster for the jobs that will matter going forward? And that'll help make a difference.
You also cited in your top 5 for 25 tech modernization, but you slashed behind it cloud acceleration. I'm hearing 2 things about the cloud right now. Acceleration's one, and the other is deaccessioning from the cloud, people moving back to the data center concept. Which is which, and for what reason, I guess?
Well, move. I think that's the most important thing, because still too many agencies spend too much of their technology budget on the old legacy stuff. And so movement has to be done. And there is a direct correlation between the ability to rapidly adopt AI, just like the ability to rapidly move to a virtual world, is dependent upon how much progress you've made on technology modernization.
But do you expect to see people start to rethink their positions in the cloud and start to think about moving back to doing things the old way?
I think that people will rethink how they're doing things in the cloud. So maybe your first foray into the cloud isn't the way that you want to do a multi-hybrid cloud experience going forward. So people will rethink. There are some organizations that shouldn't be in the business of tech ops, right? And so once they've gotten out of that business, trying to put themselves back in that business would be a really bad plan. But we do have to make sure that we adopt cloud in a way that allows us to keep pace with what's happening in the private sector. So as technologies change and approaches change, we need those flexibilities to be able to move more rapidly. So getting rid of the knotholes about how long it takes to get to the cloud, and that's everything from the acquisition process to approvals that have to be gotten and things like that, has to be sped up.
2 items that were unique, Julie, on your top 5 for 25 compared to everybody else on the show: deregulation and supply chain security initiatives. What do you see in supply chain, and you noted particularly in software, that people should be paying attention to for the new year?
Well, I think it's an issue that we cannot ignore when we're selling to the federal government, to be honest. I think they are a target. I think software security is something, when I was commissioner, we started thinking about supply chain security. And I remember I used to say to people, this is a requirement that we need to kind of have written in. This is the reality today because of the risks that the federal government faces. And I think that the commercial sector, they get that as well. There's different levels, and I think you really do, I know it's an overused term, but it's so important, is risk-based. You really have to think about it from a risk-based perspective. And I've already seen, we use the terms SBOMs, right? Software bill of materials. Who knows where that's going to go, but we're already seeing that in some, RFPs in terms of how they're going to roll that out. I think we're just seeing a general awareness, particularly after some past attacks, that we really, I mean, and this is not just the federal government, this is our critical infrastructure writ large. We really need to think about how we secure those vulnerabilities. And I think it is a value add that vendors can provide to the federal government.
Deregulation, how does that in particular do you expect impact people who are working inside the agencies?
So I've heard deregulation a lot. In fact, I was listening to a senior tech entrepreneur talk about the DOGE the other day, and he said, we're going to do a top to bottom review of programs, we're going to do a top to bottom review of regulations. And this is something that kind of builds on what happened in the last administration. There was a rule, there was like a 2-for-1 rule. You know, if you are going to put one rule out as an agency, you've got to retract 2. And personally, I think in the federal acquisition space, there's this accretion of regulations. I used to think maybe we should sunset things so that when the sunset expires, you come back and say, do we really need that? And there are mechanisms to kind of look at that. And I think that's particularly important when you're talking about buying commercial items. And that's what the federal government has to do. They cannot build everything on their own. I know they don't anymore, but they're still, you know, you flow down all these clauses, not to get in the weeds, but flowing down these clauses to commercial items, COTS items, and it makes you kind of pull your hair out, because going back to 1994, we said use commercial to the maximum extent practicable. And I think that's a theme that we really need to carry forward to move our acquisition world into the next phase.
Julie, Dave, it's great to have you both on the show. Thanks for joining me today. You can read more about Dave and Julie's top 5 for 25 on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Fed Gov Today continues in a moment.
It's true. And we're not about replacing people at all. It's a misnomer. You know, when people think about information technology and automation, it's about enhancing the work that they do, right? Enabling them to be more effective and have the wherewithal to make their decisions day in and day out, having the data at their fingertips to do so, whether it be back at HQ or out in the field.
Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, West 2025 is right around the corner. This year it's January 28th through 30th at the San Diego Convention Center. AFCEA International and U.S. Naval Institute are the co-hosts. You'll meet military, industry, and academic leaders to explore cutting-edge strategies and technologies shaping maritime security. You can read more and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. Fed Gov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the Fed Gov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today.